Welcome back to Theology for the Unwanted. I'm Dan Tilson, your host, and over there we have John Byram. But before we clue him in, I'm going to read a short bio since I have messed up the last several introductions.
Oh my.
John, aka The Talent, first encountered Catholic ministry through the university. No, just kidding.
I was about to say, are we really going to go through the whole thing they can find on the website, which is theologyfortheunwanted.com?
Good plug.
Look at that.
I appreciate it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have a parental advisory notice on this episode. We are going to be talking through some potentially tough subjects. However, I assure you that you will not be walking away sad from this, that we are just warning you in case you happen to have this on in your car and your toddler is in the back with an open ear. If so, now is your chance to turn to FM radio.
Using your parental discretion, please. And thank you.
That's fair, but come back later.
Yes.
You can always download the episode. Actually, this reminds me, we are just about to hit the 3-month mark.
Yes.
I think in like two days after this comes out.
That's insane.
It's been a really, and we took a month off, by the way.
We did take a month off.
So it's been a really good 2 months.
It's been look, for you, it's been a great 3 months because that month off was pretty much your honeymoon, which, come on now. Come on.
It was my honeymoon, but I was still recording videos.
You were putting out great content.
Yeah, Christopher was really generous. Every time we would pass by a church, he'd be like, "Do you want me to sit on a bench while you disappear for 30 minutes?
My gosh. I love Chris.
Yeah. No, things are good. Things are good. So I had my annual review at work this week.
Oh, congratulations.
I think so. I was actually, it went really well, but I was given one piece of feedback. They said that I resolve conflicts a little too diplomatically.
Wait, that's bad?
In this economy?
In this economy?
No. I mean, I work in politics, right? And we don't exactly get things done by being nice. And I am often told that even when I deliver bad news, that people walk away for like a hot second, not realizing that it was bad news, and then they have to come back to me and get clarification.
I think that's just anytime anyone hears anything political, they have to kind of digest it a little bit and then come out. There've been multiple times where like I've been listening to our favorite TV station, C-SPAN.
Oh,
and or reading something online or some clip online, and you're just like, wait, what did they just say? And you have to go back and listen to it again. Like, did they really phrase it that way? You just kind of like scratch your head. You're like, okay, like I understand what you're trying to say, but like, would the common folk understand what you're trying to say? Because I barely understand what you're trying to say.
I did 8 years of working in foreign affairs in some capacity, and now I run a theology podcast with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know what they were expecting, but it wasn't fire and brimstone.
No, definitely not fire and brimstone.
Yeah. You got anything on your mind for this week?
I don't understand the whole controversy with this whole Cracker Barrel thing. Like, as someone who works in marketing, I get what they were trying to do, but I just don't understand the outrage behind it. Yes, the logo was bad that they switched to, but like, it blew my mind. I still to this day do not understand why there was such outrage for it. Then
Wait,
again,
catch me up, but also maybe catch up other people that are listening to this, because keep in mind we have some folks in Canada and in the Philippines that are listening.
Yeah.
I don't know if they have Cracker Barrel.
They probably don't.
They definitely have Burger King.
They have Burger King where you can have it your way. Apparently, no. So Cracker Barrel is a
cheap Denny's,
kind of. Yeah, it's like a Southern Americana kind of old fashioned restaurant. The buildings mainly look like a barn. They have a lot of like old timey Americana decorations, kind of like
they have a gift shop in
that. They ain't no gift shop. That is a full on superstore in some of those places. But yeah, like you can find things from T-shirts to hats to mugs to water bottles to bread starter kits, chairs, furniture, everything that. But you can also get true Americana, like Southern Americana food.
It's supposed to be like a general store, right? Yeah. And they also have a grill.
Their marketing team decided that after a bajillion years of in-service, they wanted to kind of give a refresher to their logo. So they made the horrible decision of changing the font of Cracker Barrel to like a Times New Roman font, which, let's be honest, it doesn't look good on a logo. But they got rid of the logo of the old guy sitting in a rocking chair leaning up against the barrel. And that's what made people very upset, is what I'm guessing.
So that the older gentleman is gone? Is that why we're upset?
I guess social media is so divisive, which sometimes I just have to put my phone down.
For the record, when we warned you that this was parental advisory, it's not because this.
It was not because of Cracker
No.
Barrel, believe it or not. But yeah, I just like, from a marketing standpoint, it was a bad logo they switched to, but it was the outrage that just made me so confused. I've seen bad logos changes before and companies walk it back, but I've never seen outrage like it was on social media when that new logo came out. And like even the president got involved. And I'm just like, what is going on here? Like, this is literally a restaurant chain. Like, it made no sense.
I was in Louisiana 2 weeks ago, and I ate at Waffle House every single day.
Oh, love me some Waffle House.
And I gotta say, I don't know, I just have a renewed appreciation for diner culture. But it reminded me of when I was working for this one lady who was aspiring to public office, and we were on the campaign trail, and we passed by a Cracker Barrel, and she goes, "Guys, these are our voters." And I was
What?
like, yeah, I was like, there's a lot to unpack there. I'm feeling very conservative at the moment. But anyway, we just kept on driving by, so I never got to find out what that was all about.
The food's okay. Like, it's not terrible. I would say it's like a classier IHOP.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, it kind of threw me for a loop for a little bit. And I just think back to like my marketing class and then like, I remember a couple of years ago, and I'll stop after this, when the International House of Pancakes changed their name for like a 3-month marketing ploy.
Oh, it worked. It worked because I still order burgers when I go to IHOP.
Exactly. It worked. It was International House of Burgers, and it was a limited time change to promote the fact that they are now serving burgers, or they have been serving burgers. And like, there was outrage there too, but not on the Cracker Barrel level. Like, it just, I don't know. I will never understand, but the good news is they went back to the old logo. In fact, before we started recording, I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw a video from Cracker Barrel, because phones can read your mind now, I swear. And it was a video of them explaining why they're going back to the old logo, and they're going back to their old roots. I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, why is this a thing? Why is this happening? Anywho, there's your controversy for the week.
I appreciate that. I'm glad that you could dig deep down to something that was tugging on your heart. And it really was almost as emotionally wrought as the messages that we got from supporters and listeners of the show this week.
Absolutely. I mean, look, and again, like you mentioned at the end of every show, Dan, the messages we get here are incredible, right? Not only are our listeners really taking to the message and the topics we're talking about here on the show, but they feel a sense of security, a sense of willingness to want to share their story, which is so important. And we're going to be talking about that today also in our topics about the power of sharing that story.
The church has said goodbye and hello to many things in its theology over the centuries. And so on the time scale of one person's lifetime, it looks like the church's teachings don't change at all. But if you zoom out, you see that we're not, what's the word? There's continuity. It's not exact. It's not like we're starting over with something new. It's almost like, we had the AirPod Pro 2 and now the AirPod Pro 3 is coming out, right? Like, you can see the resemblance, and objectively you can put in these new earbuds that just came out and be like, this is better. The Catholic teaching has always gone deeper, but it has always relied on the willingness of the laity to tell their stories, because theology is just reality. That's all it is. If we believe that God is everything, that God is the source of all things that are real, that he's objectively real, then we're living in his world, right? So going back to our first episode, we talked about theology being a candle in a dark room and not a football of correctness and truth that we're like running down the field for a touchdown. So your stories matter. We're going to talk a little bit today about some concrete examples, hopefully. And as we mentioned, there's not necessarily adult themes, but there's some tough subjects in here that maybe you don't want your kids asking about. So last opportunity here to switch to FM and then come back to this later on in the evening.
What if I want to go to AM or satellite radio?
Is AM radio still a thing?
I'll be honest.
You don't know.
I'm on satellite radio most of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Valid.
So, among the messages that we got over this past week, I was touched by a few in particular. And one was a mother who reached out and said, hey, we'd been trying to have a kid for many years,
Mhm.
me and my husband. And she said, the church thinks that my child shouldn't exist. I was like, well, what do you mean by that? She's like, well, IVF. IVF is a procedure, I'm sure most folks know what it is, but essentially it's a procedure for couples who are having a hard time conceiving, and it involves science and a little bit of test tubes and some doctors. But the point is that it's a medical intervention, and the reason the church has objected to it is because it often ends up in essentially embryos being discarded. I don't know how true that is in everyday practice right now, but certainly that was the foundation of the objection over the past several decades as the church has developed its teaching on it. But I can understand the pain of this mother where she has a beautiful, beautiful 8-month-old child, and seeing how much joy this child has brought into her life, and being able to move past the pain of feeling like either her or her husband or together their bodies feel broken because they weren't able to conceive naturally without some sort of medical intervention. And now they have the solution, and it's resulted in a beautiful baby, and they are moving forward with laughter and joy every day. I can understand why it's painful to have to decide now, do I take my child to be baptized? The reality is the church looks at the child that's in front of you and says, okay, it's not a question about what you did. There's a child here. How do we take care of the child? But I understand that pain. There were others that had reached out, someone that was, again, a straight couple, but divorced and remarried
Mhm.
and struggled with annulment process.
Oh, yeah.
And they're like, the church doesn't think that my current marriage should exist. That's really, really painful. If you feel like the church is not supportive of your family situation, it doesn't matter how much positivity and stability you have found in your personal life. There's a disconnect the second that you walk into the doors of the church, because you're like, the church doesn't support the greatest thing in my life. And then finally, I've heard from a number of committed gay couples who have lost family. Either they cut off family members or their family members cut them off. I've heard from both. And they're like, wow, I made some tough, courageous choices in my life to escape all of the things that were making me feel shame deep inside. And I finally feel alive and free. And quite frankly, in this moment, I don't care whether you are enthusiastically in support of committed gay couples or not. The reality is that in every parish, there tends to be at least one couple that is hiding the fact that they are in a long-term committed relationship, because despite the fact that they feel unsupported by the church in their marriage, they still want God. And so there's that cognitive dissonance. So, John, I'm sure you have heard from people very much in the same vein, that they are just struggling with the rules and how they've overcome some of the pain in their own lives, but it required jumping outside of the bubble of what the church would say is an acceptable remedy.
Yeah, my sister, to bring up a personal story, went through the annulment process here after her first marriage, and her marriage to her second husband, who was Catholic as well. Well, I should preface this: my sister was not Catholic at the time. My family, we grew up Protestants. We were back and forth between Presbyterian and Methodist. So in this process, I converted. She has not converted because her marriage wasn't accepted in the church because of the whole, marriage outside of the church. She had to go through the annulment process. It was a very long 2 years. It was a 2-year process of my sister having to jump through hoops, getting witness documentations and statements proving, certain things that happened, that, we had to try to convince the church that essentially the vows that were taken under bad faith. And that was a process, and there was money involved, there was documentation involved. It was a very long, drawn out process, but my sister didn't feel like she was able to go to mass because she wasn't allowed to start the RCIA at the time, RCIA process, because of the status of her marriage. She was legally married to her second husband, but she was not married in the eyes of the church because she never had that annulment process. So in order to go through RCIA, she had to go through this. And it was a very long, drawn out process that when it was finally done, I could physically see the relief on my sister's face. And
No, it
she
takes
was,
a toll on you for sure.
Yeah. And then she was able to go through RCIA. I was proud to be her sponsor, to bring her into the church. And now she is very happy in the Catholic Church.
I think a lot of Catholics who have simply grown up in the faith and maybe haven't had any one of these quote unquote legal challenges, canonically speaking, and under church law, maybe everyone has some sort of pain and suffering in their life. But as our guest, Matthew from Deconstructing Cleric, said on the episode last week, he said that in his training for the priesthood, he was taught to defend the rules, right? Like your primary role in the church is to defend the faith, and that preaching the truth in that way is often the best moral good that he can offer. And he talked about struggling with that personally as he counseled different individuals. Now, I don't know if you know this, but this sort of strict, rigid, like, hey, I come to the church with my problems, and then it's just like a flow chart of legal computations. Did you know that it wasn't always like that?
No, come on. It always had to be like that. I mean, that's the only part of the church I've ever known, right? Right?
Yeah, there we go. There's the facetious sarcasm.
I had to throw that in there.
No, it's it's a valid question because, for so many centuries, the Catholic Church was the glue to culture, to the whole country. There was this tie between government and church because that is how God had ordained it. And we just kind of took that for granted. And so there wasn't always this tension. But it is true, as the world has gone through more modernization, more technological revolutions, more freedom, especially, the church has kind of reacted in a certain way to kind of make sure that we are stabilizing the Catholic community and that we are keeping the family together. So, again, just a quick parental advisory here. But one example that I wanted to start with was, this is according to Father Jim Keenan. He's at Boston College. He's a fantastic moral theologian. And he's done a lot of work tracing the development of Catholic thought through the centuries, particularly as it relates to Catholic law. And one example really caught me because I don't know that I had seen this word written in a journal article before. It was masturbation.
There we go.
There it is.
There it is. Cat's out of the box.
Even as we were writing up the potential show notes for this, I think we had a couple abbreviations and we were like, are we going to say this? Is this word allowed?
Yeah, especially it feels like, especially in modern culture, like the scientific term, if you will, is not used. Like there's so much slang terminology that's in our modern culture, in our modern vocabulary, that it just feels weird when you say the actual term.
I'm blushing because I'm embarrassed talking about this.
Right?
It's,
no, he actually is turning red right now.
No. Well, the idea in early Christianity was that, of course, the man has the seed and it is meant to be in a certain vessel. Mm-hmm. And you have to imagine that the people who were writing the rules, I don't know, I'm going to throw it to you real quick. Can you just describe for me the average Catholic who was writing the rules of Catholicism in the 11th century?
In the 11th century, so it was probably in a dark church or cathedral.
They had sunlight. Okay, all right.
Let me finish there. Or, not that the Franciscans were around, maybe a cave, secluded, maybe doing their daily prayers. They're kind of away from the rest of society. And
a monk in a cell, basically.
Yeah, I was trying to put it in a nicer term, try to paint a nicer picture, but yes, a monk in a cell.
A monk in a cell.
We'll call it a prayer room.
Okay. Well, of course, a monk in a cell doesn't sound like you have a lot of lady visitors or a lot of friends, to be quite honest.
It's a very lonely life. It's you and our Lord.
But a communal life. And that's kind of where they found their friendships. But The point being for this was that obviously the struggles for achieving holiness as a man that is living in a room by yourself all day
Mhm.
is going to be different than you or I here in modern day society. So they were shielded. They were shielded from a lot of terrible things. This includes, and we'll just abbreviate here, SA.
Mhm.
Okay. And hopefully you guys get where we were going with that. But the point was that in the 11th century, according to Father Jim Keenan, the church taught that self-pleasure was a sin against nature. That was kind of the origin
Mhm.
of that term. And they categorized a handful of things with that. But it never occurred to them that SA might be at the same level of or greater sin against nature, because at least in that theoretical circumstance, the seed was landing in the proper intended vessel. And it's crazy how disconnected we were from reality. Insane.
Yeah.
Like, this should have really, you would think that this is just common sense. It was not. It was not. And so it's so important to speak up and share your stories, whether you've experienced something negative in your parish or a friend needs some encouragement with sharing that. When you start sharing your stories, that's when the church says, oh, I guess we hadn't quite explained the theology as it relates to that situation yet. So it took a few centuries, but Father Jim Keenan noted that self pleasure was a sin against nature and SA was not. And that's problematic. Now, how do we get to where we are today?
Tiptoeing. No, I mean, look, obviously, when you take a look at history, you need to do it through the lens of the time you're studying.
Hmm.
Like, if you take 2025 and apply that to even 1980, you're looking at it wrong,
Yeah.
right? To understand why things developed the way they did in the church, you have to go back to that mindset of what was going on in the 11th century. What were they dealing with as a society? What was the church having to deal with in order to shepherd their flock? It's a very different world now than it was in the 11th century, right? It's like, when you take a look at monks in a dark room in a monastery coming up with these ideas. Now it's like the idea of masturbation is something that is a lot more socially acceptable, if you will, but on the level of church teaching still has that negative connotation to it. But now the difference is you're not a guy locked in a small dark room writing theology. Now you're a man or a woman that's exposed to it on television, or exposed to temptations, I should say, on television or online or on social media that may lead you down the road to self pleasure or something like that will cause you to sin. So it is, you have to take it within the context of the time.
Yeah, a listener wrote in last week and he's asked, because obviously we've said that theology has advanced quite a bit
Mhm.
and we now have a greater understanding of the human person. And he said, where is masturbation and all of that? He said, is it still like the same level of grave sin? Like, what is it? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I mean, from a standpoint of sin, it's still considered a mortal sin, something that severs your relationship with God. But I feel like at the same time, we have a better understanding of the addictive nature to it, because there is a chemical element, right? There's that dopamine release that comes with it that can become addictive. So the science, faith and science can go hand in hand. The Catholic Church was a big proponent of advancing science. So the scientific understanding of it helps us better explain and understand the addictive nature of masturbation, self pleasure, whatever we're going to call it, and that chemical dopamine release and why that can become addictive.
Oh, for sure. I think his question though was, if it's wrong, why is it wrong? Because in a way, like on Theology for the
Mhm.
Unwanted, if you look at reflections, it says, okay, this was our old understanding, and now we have a more evolved understanding that is continuous with Catholic teaching, but not consistent.
Yeah.
And so I think he was fishing for, like, is there a gap in Basically, like, are you saying it's okay now?
Yeah, I don't think the church is saying it's okay. I think I alluded to this when I was talking about my time in Chicago with, actually, no, it was my friend who had the addiction that he was struggling with this topic. And the priest told him that, look, can it be a sin if your mind is not in the right place? If your mind is addicted to that dopamine release, do you have full consent of your mind doing what you are doing? And I think that's kind of where the church is at right now, is they still see it as a sin, but they understand that there's an addictive quality to it. And if there's an addiction there, your mind can't fully consent. And because of that fully consent, they aren't excusing it as a sin, but they don't look at it at the same level.
I think I answered him a little bit more diplomatically. That is totally fair, but I think I like skirted around it a little bit, maybe in my embarrassment. But I was
I
like,
don't like skirting around things. I'm sorry.
I was like, be a man, you know.
Yeah.
I was like, listen, my interest in moral theology is like whether or not we are pointing our actions and ourselves towards God, or if we are finding ways to point inward. So anyway, when we were messaging back and forth on this topic, I was like, listen, deep down in my heart, is it a sin? Yeah, probably. I think so. And the reason why is because we found another way to direct attention inward rather than to direct it outward and discover God through the dignity that he has given to others. So for me, I tend to obsess a little bit less about the action by itself. We're going to be talking about that in just a second, because Aquinas gave us three terms to help us judge things. And in the past 3 centuries, the Catholic Church has really just fixated on the action rather than looking at the totality of the circumstances. For me, it's more holistically about whether or not we are aiming our lives and ourselves and our attention towards God, and by doing that, towards the good of the others, or have we found yet another way to make the attention about us? And my fear is that with the sexual sins, because I was just watching a video by Father Mike Schmitz from 10 years ago where he talks about the chair. I know you've all watched that video. He talks about these difficult subjects in a very charitable way. But even when talking about sin, have we found yet a different way to point the attention towards us? So Aquinas gave 3 particular words. And the way that I like to translate these is we have the action, the situation, and the goal. Those are the 3 ways to kind of judge an action for whether or not it's morally good or bad. Kind of like if a chef had a steak and then he had like, I don't know, the sauce, and then like the oven was on 350 or whatever, you wouldn't be like those are 3 separate actions. You'd be like, no, he is char grilling, baking, whatever a chef would do to a steak.
I like how you said char grilling and you mentioned the oven. That's fine. It's fine. We understand you don't cook.
Can you tell that I'm barely? Hey, we're looking at houses right now, and every time we get to a photo of a kitchen, I'm like, you can just keep scrolling. I'm only in there to clean.
Oh my gosh.
For the record, I have a job that requires me to be away for many meal times, and therefore I have never really learned how to cook.
Easy Mac and instant noodles are his best friend.
I did cook twice during COVID.
Oh?
Yeah.
What'd you cook?
Pasta.
Oh my gosh, that's the easiest thing to cook.
Okay. So back to Aquinas.
Dan, I'm not judging you.
I feel judged. Aquinas gave us 3 words: the action, the situation surrounding the action, and then kind of the goal or the reason behind the action. Like, so what are you doing? Who, what, where, how, and then why are you doing it? And these are kind of like 3 ingredients to any action. By the way, brilliant framework for his time, considering that only decades before the monks were like, I don't know, is essay bad? You know, like,
come a long way.
Come a long way. Yeah, Aquinas, and for the record, Aquinas was uber controversial of his time. Yeah. He was at the University of Paris, I believe, and the bishop like even intervened, censoring the university. And they didn't use the word modern, but they certainly tried to insist that Aquinas was changing Catholic teaching, we would say develop. We would say develop. So I don't know. Let's think of an example here. We just had the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. Been 20 years exactly?
God, it feels like it just happened. It feels like it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
It was.
But anyway, I think it was 20 years. And of course, this, for me as a New Orleans Saints fan and all the times that I've been down there, I have learned more about moral theology in New Orleans from listening to people's stories than I have anywhere else. Because the situation where an entire city flooded and there wasn't really any leader that was either capable or willing to respond if they were capable in an adequate way. And you had these people who were hungry. It was hot out because it was August when this happened. There was no power. The number of deaths was just shocking. And so I've learned a lot about moral theology because humanity really displayed itself during that time.
Yeah.
For example, I remember a headline. It was clearly they were depicting a white family, but I don't believe it said white family. I think it was just like man, woman, child, right? And this is partially from my memory here, but it was pretty vivid in the sense that the headline was like, this person is getting bread for their hungry family. And then I think on the same day, there was a headline from a different outlet and it was showing, again, didn't describe them this way, but it was clearly an African American family.
Mm-hmm.
And it used the word looting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was an ugly moment in the sense that I was like, we as humans interpreted this differently. And it made me wonder, what would Aquinas say? What would Aquinas say? I mean, like the action is effectively stealing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't own the bread, you walk into a store, you take the bread, you leave without paying. Okay. But then what's the circumstance? What was the intention?
Yeah, obviously the circumstance would be a natural disaster occurred. Your family is hungry and they need food, and there's no legitimate way about going about it because everything's flooded, everything's shut down, travel is hard, and you need food for your family. You need food to survive.
The point that I want us to really take home from this is that the way that Aquinas in his day and age would have evaluated this exact situation and the way that the Catholic Church in the past 2, maybe 3 centuries would evaluate it, totally different.
Very different.
Yeah, they're using the same 3 criteria. They're looking at the action, the situation, and the goal. But Aquinas said you got to look at all 3 as one action.
Mm-hmm.
And he said in this particular case, Aquinas would have viewed the bread as effectively being a common good, right? And so at that point where, I don't know, capitalism or paying your fair share is like not a possibility, then in this case, the moral good is taking the bread, and we wouldn't even call it stealing. How do you think things have changed over the past couple centuries? Have you ever heard someone like do this? What if they're, if you're dying, but like you can steal some bread? Any idea how it's changed?
Yeah, I mean, you can't do that in modern society. I mean, for me, it goes back to, and I love this, one of my favorite Disney movies, Aladdin, animated version, not live action.
Okay.
But the scene where Aladdin goes into the street market to steal apples to feed him and his monkey Abu. So, why was he stealing it? Well, he was poor. He didn't have money. He needed food. So in his eyes, it was justified because he was only taking 2 or 3 apples. At the end of the day, that's not going to make or break the merchant in the market selling those apples because he had the dire need of food to live. Nowadays, you walk into a Wegmans, a Safeway, or whatever, and you're like, oh, I'm hungry. I'm going to go take these 4 apples. You're going to have the boys in blue outside waiting for you.
Okay, with the Disney Aladdin, the animated one, right? From like maybe the 90s.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a 90s kid.
I kind of remember him having a cheeky smile as he took it. So you can't be happy you're stealing the apple.
Or he's just given that false sense of reassurance. We're like, I'm not up to anything
He's
bad.
misunderstood.
He is, he was misleading. he was tricking the merchant into a false sense of security.
Oh, man.
While he was stealing the apples.
Well, in the past couple of centuries, really since the American Civil War, and I'll talk in a second about how I think that actually played into this, the Catholic Church has really renewed and reinvigorated its usage of Aquinas' three terms, but we have something different. We are now looking primarily at the action. The action. And so in this case, stealing is stealing. Stealing is always wrong, is what the Catholic Church would say. That's not what Aquinas would say in the particular circumstance of Hurricane Katrina. He would say that person is taking bread, a common good for their family. But because of how crazy the world was changing, seemingly all at once, I believe it was 1879. So obviously the United States, we're still amidst like pretty heavy reconstruction over here. Over in Europe, they're looking at us and they're like, oh boy, we can't have that.
I feel like Europe looks at us like that a lot.
A lot, yeah. No, things never change.
Correct.
No, they were looking at that. Of course, I believe Napoleon and his Second French Empire had just fallen, if my memory is succeeding here. Technologically, what happened? What happened during that time frame?
The Industrial Revolution and the light bulb.
The light bulb.
Yeah.
Dude, they freaking brought lights inside.
It's crazy. And it wasn't a candle.
Okay, you were just talking about how in the 11th century that theology was written in a dark room and,
with
suddenly...
a candle.
Sure, with the candle.
That burned out in 2 hours.
Yeah, but look at this like 90-watt light bulb above me. It's like a very harsh elimination of any shadows in the room.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Look, the world changed seemingly all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people were realizing if you can challenge your government, if you can overthrow your government, of course there was Immanuel Kant, and so people were like, subjective reality, and whatever you're experiencing is real. So if you can also challenge your God, man, that's a recipe for disaster. Because think about how close church and state were back then.
Hand in hand.
Hand in hand. And if the state is falling, we don't also want the church falling, right? And you have to imagine it like this. The papal states, I believe, that's the last part. The Catholic Church used to be like governor or like king over territory. Not just Vatican City, but like vast amounts of territory. That was also shrinking. And so we're starting to replace our military might with theological might. And the Pope and the Church, I think very rightfully for that time, were like, lock it down, boys. Like, take those thought bubbles and lock it down. And so we became a lot more harsh. Which circles back to when you were sharing the story about the annulment, how difficult it was. With all of the change going on in the world, it was really important to maintain that gift of unity that we have as a Catholic family. I mean, so much was changing. So many people were leaving. So many governments were falling. People were dying in wars. It was just like, stop. We just need something to be constant. And so Pope Leo the 13th, the previous Pope Leo, not the current one, in I believe it was 1879, was like, okay, we're bringing Aquinas back. And it took several decades. It wasn't like an overnight thing where people were just, okay, cool. But there was this renewed focus on the action and making that objective in such a way that you couldn't really question it, right? Of course, people will say, well, like, well, is abortion always wrong? Is murder always wrong? Is like, we go to these extreme, well, it's not even really extreme because it's so commonplace. Mm-hmm. But we go to these examples that people think are ironclad. But the problem is we have found ourselves in an even more modern world, an increasingly modern world, where we don't just have light bulbs in every room. We also have AI.
Yeah.
And so the church is trying to figure out, okay, we lock this down maybe a little too hard. Maybe we know more about psychology and the human person that makes judging circumstances a little bit more difficult. And I feel like in many ways that's what Vatican II was aiming to do. But again, there was a little bit of lack of being sure that we were going about it the wrong way. Doesn't it feel like we're once again having like a rise of polarization in the church?
Always, yeah. It really goes from diocese to diocese, right? It feels like there's a different, what do the cool kids say? A different vibe, a different aura based upon what diocese you go to.
Please use aura farming in a sentence.
Aura farmers.
Explain to me why this is trending on Twitter.
I was going to try
X,
to. I was going
sorry.
to try to bring in Rizzler and also Phantom Tax, which
Oh, that was last year.
I just learned
Oh.
actually what Phantom Tax was. Compliments. Shout out to my nephew who definitely does not listen to this, but I'm still giving him a shout out regardless because not only did he cringe hard when I said it, but then he was nice enough to explain to me what it was. So thank you.
Well, before the show, we were talking about like some of the complicated scenarios that we've come across. And again, there is no way that in a 1 hour episode that we are going to help you pick apart your particular circumstance. The bottom line is like things don't have to be the ugly ways that they have been, particularly in recent decades, whether that is polarization politically, between families, between friends, or even like how rigidly we try to interpret the rule of law within Catholicism to understand whether or not you are at fault for something. And far too often, we have turned this moral good of trying to help people reach God in their lives, and we have turned it into like a legal dispute. So we've used this theologian before, but Father Aristide Fumagalli, he's a professor at the seminary in Milan, Italy, and he has what he calls the symbolic theory of action. So he was trying to avoid both the rigid ways of the Catholic Church over just the past couple centuries, where we only look at the action, and he was also trying to avoid some of the more modern voices that are saying, okay, well, we're going to turn everything into like a sliding scale, right? He was like, there's got to be a better way. And in prayer and teaching and encountering others, he came to realize that like, hey, we're judging actions, but actions often have things behind them, right? What was the example that you and I did earlier before the show? Do you remember?
Oh, the handshake. Yeah.
Yeah. So
we went deep into the whole the whole theology of a handshake.
we did. So imagine me and John in the recording studio, and we're just like shaking each other's hands, and then we're just standing there making theological observations about it.
It got deep.
It did get deep because let's start with this. A handshake, is that good, bad, or neutral?
Usually I would say a handshake is good.
Usually good because it doesn't deal with like kind of the, I guess for sake of brevity here, we'll say the life or death.
Yeah, it's
neutral, right? But generally we would say, oh, a handshake, that's a good sign, right? If you see two leaders shaking hands, you're like, we're not going to war, right? But then we talked about like what's behind that, and what did we kind of discover?
Oh my goodness, I went down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, you did.
It was like,
you were pretending you were running for governor of a certain commonwealth.
I recalled an interaction I had with a candidate at the time that was asking me for his vote, asking me to vote for him. And when he went to go shake my hand, he gave me what I like to call the limp fish handshake.
Yeah.
Which I went in for a sturdy handshake because, someone here is running to be the governor of my state. And he gave me a handshake that I felt was very disrespectful, that just felt like he was going through the motions. So while the handshake may have been seen outside of the interaction by other people as a good image, a positive interaction, in reality, it was not good. I did not want to vote for him after that handshake.
As you were describing it, I was like, it's probably like a whatever moment. And then you replicated the handshake, and I was like, ooh.
Yeah, and as someone who works in politics, like if you were to give that handshake to someone,
yeah,
that doesn't convey a positive message.
No, I mean, either you weren't present or you're not confident in yourself or whatever.
Correct.
And so again, just like with Aquinas, and we had those three words, we've got the action, the situation, and the goal. In this case, on the surface, all three great things were there, and you're like, great, morally good action, except that there was some sort of symbol behind it where the politician like wasn't mentally present with you.
Yeah.
Right. So we also talked about this in a situation I found myself in about a month ago when I was volunteering. There were some of our fellow volunteers, they were ladies, and they were like, hey, this one guy that we're serving, He's giving us all hugs, and it's a little creepy, and I kind of like him to stop, but he just like giving us all hugs, right? Well, obviously, being ever the diplomat, I don't want to accuse him. I kind of want to go over and set some boundaries.
Yeah.
But, a hug, again, good, bad, neutral. Normally, we look at that on the surface and we're like,
Well, like as I was trying to explain, right? Like a hug is obviously more intimate than a handshake,
for sure.
but generally it's conceived as a good action. But again, it's the reason behind it that can really.
Oh, I just
Yeah.
realized, ladies and gentlemen, if your HR department ever needs two guest speakers, bring John and Dana in to
Yes.
talk action, situation, and goal. Wow, this really writes itself.
It really does. Like, so prime example, right? And I work for a company in corporate America. And I remember one of my coworkers that I had a really good work relationship with. When she left, she told me saying goodbye to me was the hardest part.
Mm.
And she wanted to give me a hug. I could see that she wanted to give me a hug. At that time, it didn't bother me, but I wasn't going to be the one to engage in the hug.
Mm.
So I kind of looked at her and like I went in for the handshake, right?
Mm.
I was the guy that went in for the handshake, and she looked at me and she goes, "Can I give you a hug?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah." And she gave me a hug, and it's a respectful workplace hug, but that interaction was more symbolic of our work relationship that we've grown together with over the 5 years. I also made that comment to you, Dan, that when we first became friends, if you were to ask me for a hug 3 months in, right, into our friendship, like eons ago, back like in the Stone Age, I would have been like, okay, maybe. No, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Cause like I'm still getting to know you, right? But like now we've been friends for, well over a decade. Giving you a hug when I see you, to me is completely normal because of our closeness and our friendship, right? So I feel like hugs do take a higher plateau, but it's still seen as a good gesture.
This is another example why telling your stories are important, even if they are awkward like you.
I'm not awkward.
Because the good holy monks of the 11th century that were writing the theology and some of the earlier rules for the Catholic Church, if you're living in a cell by yourself, you don't have to learn boundaries. The boundaries are the literal walls that are around you. And so a lot of this is what we would now think is common sense, but really there was no opportunity for the monks to encounter these scenarios. So that's why telling your stories are important.
Yeah.
Some of this is just educating your church.
Yes.
Okay. And then as soon as you educate the church, they're like, oh, yeah, our theology actually works really, really well with that. We just didn't have the vocab to say it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's some of it. So anyway, back to the situation. If we were in 1879, a hug would be considered like morally neutral. Not bad, not good. It would be morally neutral. And so when you can't judge the action alone, according to the theology of the more rigid neo-scholastic 19th century, then you have to start like debating and weighing the situation and weighing the goal. And you have to like kind of go back and forth. You're like, oh, maybe it was bad, but like how bad was it? And is he culpable? Meaning, is he at fault? Or is it bad and it was wrong, but he's not at fault? You get into this really weird, almost legal battle over a hug,
Mm-hmm.
But Father Fumagalli, he is like, guys, it doesn't have to be so hard. We can just kind of bypass that. We can look at the symbol behind the action. So with the gentleman that I had to sit down and be like, please stop hugging the female volunteers, the initial reaction, what do you think his initial reaction was? Like, just on a human level, I'm sitting down, I'm like, hey, you hugging the female volunteers is making them uncomfortable. And you're like,
well, obviously, anytime someone gets accused of something negative or that's something that they perceive as negative, they're going to have a defensive reaction, right? Whether it's extreme aggression or it's like, hey, I didn't mean anything by it. That's what I'm kind of guessing you probably did.
It was exactly that.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, I'm just trying to show my appreciation for them. And
yeah, there's other ways.
well, But again, we don't want to accuse anyone. So I was like, okay, listen, if that's what you really want, if you want to show your appreciation for all the volunteers here, I'm open to a hug. I know that that volunteer over there is open to hugs, and that volunteer over there is open to hugs. All three of us, by the way, were men. And shocker, do you think he wanted to give me a hug?
I mean, probably. I mean, I would, yes, but no, I'm
No,
assuming he did
no.
not.
And so that kind of revealed the symbol behind the action, right? And still, it's hard for us to judge whether he was trying to assert dominance or just make them uncomfortable, or if it was sexual. Point is, boundaries crossed. Don't do that. We don't need to get into a legal debate. Now, these are very simple scenarios here, even as they are awkward as someone that had to like have that intervention. But I had this rule in politics. It's someone's actual reason for something is always the second reason that they give you and not the first.
Mhm.
You ever thought about that?
No, I've spent my fair share of time on political campaigns before, but I've never really thought of it like that. No.
There was a diplomatic meeting I was in where we had a dispute over trade between, I don't even remember what you call them. It was in Asia. They grow apples.
Mhm.
Okay. And it was crazy. We were like, why have you restricted the cell phone rights, like the cell phone tower access in this particular state in your country? And they're like, well, it's impacting the Apple trade because, like, whatever. And I was like, that makes no sense. Try again. And they're like, oh, this and this. And I was like, is it potentially because the farmers are protesting? And they're like, no.
It's that high pitched no.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Yeah. But an even more serious example, there was a diplomatic meeting that we were in, and I was really grateful to work for a boss that wherever Catholics or Christians were being persecuted, that we could directly address that
Mhm.
with the diplomats of that country. And so we brought up some restrictions that, yeah, it was probably targeting Muslims. It was definitely targeting Catholics. We didn't like either of that. We just don't want governments picking your religion for you or forcing you into it or harming you because of authentic belief in God. And so we brought this up, and I'll never forget that that particular official gave me an answer that they thought I would be sympathetic to. They said, "Oh, well, the reason that we've restricted these religious practices is because 9/11." And I was like, "Excuse me?"
Oh my gosh.
And like, after a second or two, I caught the logic that they were about to go towards,
Yeah.
and I wasn't buying it. But it was just the way that they were like 9/11. And they're like, we don't want to have one of those in our country. And so of course we have to restrict the rights and make sure that people who are practicing religion of all faiths are not being extremists. Well, we called BS on that. And of course, the second reason that they gave had a little bit more of an economic twist to it.
Mhm.
And I was like, thank you. Next time, start with that because that's the honest truth. But people always tell you like what they think that they want you to hear. And
Yeah.
so whenever I'm training someone in foreign affairs, I always say my first rule is people are never fighting about what they tell you they're fighting about. And so the Catholic Church, too, is learning that behind all of our actions, there's some sort of symbol. It represents something. And it's often not the thing that is most easily understood from the physical action or not most easily understood from the words and the justifications behind it. You have to dig deep. We're learning that there are layers.
Yeah, and there's a subreddit that I enjoy scrolling through. It's called Ask an American, where people from all over the world will ask for something that's like cultural and how it's different in the US. And I remember there's this one thread about the idea of bringing flowers to work for coworkers on Mother's Day. Like, is it culturally acceptable in the United States to bring flowers for your coworker who is a mother?
Oh, I
And
I thought I misheard you at first because that's a little weird.
it's 100% weird,
Yeah.
right? Here in America, we would think that, well, first off, if you did that, HR would be, in that office in a lightning, split of a lightning bolt, right? And that's kind of the response, right? So all the Americans that are in there, we all have our states that we're tagged from. And I was like, yeah, as someone who dabbles in HR, this would be a massive, massive no-no, even if there is like good intention behind it. I don't care what your relationship is with that person. Generally, the only flowers you give to anybody is your spouse if it's Mother's Day, or your mother if it's Mother's Day. Generally, you don't go beyond that unless you have like a very close family friend and you're going to visit them and you want to give them like a nice gesture. It's not roses. It's probably something different. I mean, you and I talk about this all the time off air because it's probably one of our favorite segments, but the War of the Roses.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Okay, just for copyright reasons here, that is your morning show on iHeartRadio.
And there's a lot of other shows on iHeartRadio and other networks that call
disclaimer. This podcast is actually insured, so we are always afraid of saying the wrong thing.
If anything, we're promoting it, right?
Okay, that's fair.
So the segment goes, someone calls in, thinks their partner's cheating on them. So they want to set them up with a fake flower shop offer to give them roses to someone anywhere within the United States for free. And the ploy is, oh, we're a small shop. We just opened. We're struggling in the economy. We just want to get our product out there so people can see it. And they do a great job. They sell it every single time. I don't know how people keep falling for this, but they do. And it never fails. They always give it to somebody else. That inclination is always right. And then they go into this argument between the person who's giving flowers to somebody else and their partner. Like, why are you giving the flowers to this other person? Why is this? Why is it? That's the power of flowers here in the US. That's kind of why you can't give your coworker flowers for Mother's Day. It just sends the wrong message.
Look, on a 1-hour podcast episode, we are not going to dive into Aquinas deep enough that we can help you kind of go through your day-to-day, at least not in one episode. Maybe we'll do more of a series as we go further on. But here's what I'll say. We want to see a resurgence of Aquinas, especially in English-speaking Catholicism, and one that is maybe more faithful to the original Aquinas, who said you got to look at just like a chef with the ingredients in the oven and the grill or whatever, and the steak. Those are not all separate actions. It's one action. Okay. And so in a very complicated world, your quick trick, if you're trying to estimate for yourself whether or not you have the right intentions, what's the action that you're about to do and what's the symbol behind the action? Just reflect on it, right? If you're giving flowers, flowers can be, I'm sorry. It can be, please go on a date with me. It can be appreciation. It can be all kinds of things. But if you start to look at the symbols behind your actions, that in itself will give you a little bit more of an understanding. Okay, today I'm not pointing my life inward and towards myself and my own desires and my own ego. No, I'm actually I'm aiming for God, and I'm doing that by discovering the dignity of the people around me, because God created all of us in his image and likeness. Therefore, if we are wanting to discover God, we are trying our hardest to discover the dignity that he placed in every single person. So it doesn't have to be as hard as the church has made it since the 1870s. It served an exceptional purpose for its time. I think what Pope Leo XIII did, I'm a big fan of Leo XIII, Rerum Novarum, all of his various documents, which really helped the church find some stability and be a path of constant unity in very positive and stabilizing ways through very tough times. We are once again going through a whole new set of hard times through polarization, through the advent of AI. And
love me some AI.
And just trying to understand how that's going to change our lives, our economy, our governments, whatever. It's a scary time. It is. We don't have to resort to lock it down, boys. So start by understanding the symbols behind your action. If you do that, that's 85% of the battle, and that will help you course correct so that you can find God in your life. Don't get stuck in these legal battles. If you feel stuck in the church, you don't have to stay stuck. If somebody is telling you that you are stuck, then please send them to theologyfortheunwanted.com for some reflections. But anyway, I hope in some small ways that we can help you along in this journey. Any closing thoughts, Jon?
No, I'm very excited to expand on this in future episodes and continuing to try to bring the unwanted, if you will, back to the church.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to listen. I am so grateful for every single person that reaches out. It really encourages me. I know it encourages Jon as well to keep going. But just like the monks of the 11th century who needed to hear your stories, by hearing what it is that you're going through, we understand what it is a little bit better the church needs to respond to. And it helps us to try and bring up some new reflections every week on this podcast. So in the meantime, before our next episode, please do spend some time on theologyfortheunwanted.com. Check out the reflections. We encourage you, if there is a situation that you're facing that is not addressed at all, let us know. And we may not have the answers right away, but we would love to reflect on it. You help us grow as well, just as we're working to help the church do better. So thank you again.